Chapter 7 of Allan and the Holy Flower. This recording is in the public domain. Allan and the Holy Flower by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 7. The Rush of the Slaves. Well, we did all that we could in the way of making ready. After we had strengthened the thorn fence of our boma as much as possible, and lit several large fires outside of it to give us light, I allotted his place to each of the hunters, and saw that their rifles were in order and that they had plenty of ammunition. Then I made Stephen lie down to sleep, telling him that I would wake him to watch later on. This, however, I had no intention of doing, as I wanted him to rise fresh and with a steady nerve on the occasion of his first fight. As soon as I saw that his eyes were shut, I sat down on a box to think. To tell the truth, I was not altogether happy in my mind. To begin with, I did not know how the 20 bearers would behave under fire. They might be seized with panic and rush about, in which case I determined to let them out of the boma to take their chance, for panic is a catching thing. A worse matter was our rather awkward position. There were a good many trees round the camp, among which an attacking force could take cover, but what I feared much more than this, or even than the reedy banks of the stream along which they could creep out of reach of our bullets, was a sloping stretch of land behind us, covered with thick grass and scrub, and rising to a crest about 200 yards away. Now, if the Arabs got round to this crest, they would fire straight into our boma and make it untenable. Also, if the wind were in their favour, they might burn us out or attack under the clouds of smoke. As a matter of fact, by the special mercy of Providence, none of these things happened, for a reason which I will explain presently. In the case of a night, or rather a dawn attack, I have always found that hour before the sky begins to lighten very trying indeed. As a rule, everything that can be done is done, so that one must sit idle. Also, it is then that both the physical and the moral qualities are at their lowest ebb, as is the mercury in the thermometer. The night is dying, the day is not yet born. All nature feels the influence of that hour. Then bad dreams come, then infants wake and call, then memories of those who are lost to us arise, then the hesitating soul often takes its plunge into the depths of the unknown. It is not wonderful, therefore, that on this occasion the wheels of time drove heavily for me. I knew that the morning was at hand by many signs. The sleeping bearers turned and muttered in their sleep. A distant lion ceased its roaring and departed to its own place. An alert-minded cock crew somewhere, and our donkeys rose and began to pull at their tether ropes. As yet, however, it was quite dark. Hans crept up to me. I saw his wrinkled yellow face in the light of the watch-fire. "I smell the dawn," he said, and vanished again. Mavovo appeared, his massive frame silhouetted against the blackness. "Watcher by night, the night is done," he said. "If they come at all, the enemy should soon be here." Saluting, he too passed away into the dark, and presently I heard the sounds of spear blades striking together and of rifles being cocked. I went to Stephen and woke him. He sat up yawning, muttered something about greenhouses, then remembering said, "Are those Arabs coming? We are in for a fight at last. Jolly old fellow, isn't it?" "You are a jolly old fool," I answered inconsequently, and marched off in a rage. My mind was uneasy about this inexperienced young man. If anything should happen to him, what should I say to his father? Well, in that event it was probable that something would happen to me too. Very possibly we should both be dead in an hour. Certainly I had no intention of allowing myself to be taken alive by those slaving devils. Hassan's remarks about fires and ant-heaps and the sun were too vividly impressed upon my memory. In another 5 minutes everybody was up, though it required kicks to rouse most of the bearers from their slumbers. They, poor men, were accustomed to the presence of death, and did not suffer him to disturb their sleep. Still I noted that they muttered together and seemed alarmed. "If they show signs of treachery, you must kill them," I said to Mavovo, who nodded in his grave, silent fashion. Only we left the rescued slave woman and her child, plunged in the stupor of exhaustion in a corner of the camp. What was the use of disturbing her? Sammy, who seemed far from comfortable, brought 2 pannikins of coffee to Stephen and myself. "This is a momentous occasion, Messrs. Quatermain and Somers," he said, as he gave us the coffee, and I noted that his hand shook and his teeth chattered. "The cold is extreme." He went on in his copybook English by way of explaining these physical symptoms, which he saw I had observed. "Mr. Quatermain, it is all very well for you to paw the ground and smell the battle from afar, as it is written in the book of Job, but I was not brought up to the trade and take it otherwise. Indeed, I wish I was back at the Cape, yes, even within the whitewashed walls of the place of detention." "So do I," I muttered, keeping my right foot on the ground with difficulty. But Stephen laughed outright and asked: "What will you do, Sammy, when the fighting begins?" "Mr. Somers," he answered, "I have employed some wakeful hours in making a hole behind that tree trunk, through which I hope bullets will not pass. There, being a man of peace, I shall pray for our success." "And if the Arabs get in, Sammy?" "Then, sir, under Heaven I shall trust to the fleetness of my legs." I could stand it no longer. My right foot flew up and caught Sammy in the place at which I had aimed. He vanished, casting a reproachful look behind him. Just then a terrible clamour arose in the slavers' camp, which hitherto had been very silent, and just then also the first light of dawn glinted on the barrels of our guns. "Look out!" I cried, as I gulped down the last of my coffee. "There's something going on there." The clamour grew louder and louder till it seemed to fill the skies with a concentrated noise of curses and shrieking. Distinct from it, as it were, I heard shouts of alarm and rage, and then came the sounds of gunshots, yells of agony, and the thud of many running feet. By now the light was growing fast, as it does when once it comes in these latitudes. 3 more minutes, and through the grey mist of the dawn we saw dozens of black figures struggling up the slope towards us. Some seemed to have logs of wood tied behind them, others crawled along on all fours, others dragged children by the hand, and all yelled at the top of their voices. "The slaves are attacking us," said Stephen, lifting his rifle. "Don't shoot," I cried. "I think they have broken loose and are taking refuge with us." I was right. These unfortunates had used the 2 knives which our men smuggled to them to good purpose. Having cut their bonds during the night, they were running to seek the protection of the Englishmen and their flag. On they surged, a hideous mob, the slave sticks still fast to the necks of many of them, for they had not found time or opportunity to loose them all, while behind came the Arabs, firing. The position was clearly very serious, for if they burst into our camp we should be overwhelmed by their rush and fall victim to the bullets of their captors. "Hans," I cried, "take the men who were with you last night and try to lead those slaves round behind us. Quick! Quick now, before we are stamped flat." Hans darted away, and presently I saw him and the 2 other men running towards the approaching crowd, Hans waving a shirt or some other white object to attract their attention. At the time the foremost of them had halted and were screaming, "Mercy, English! Save us, English!" having caught sight of the muzzles of our guns. This was a fortunate occurrence indeed, for otherwise Hans and his companions could never have stopped them. The next thing I saw was the white shirt bearing away to the left on a line which led past the fence of our boma into the scrub and high grass behind the camp. After it struggled and scrambled the crowd of slaves like a flock of sheep after the bell wether. To them Hans's shirt was a kind of white helmet of Navarre. So that danger passed by. Some of the slaves had been struck by the Arab bullets, or trodden down in the rush, or collapsed from weakness, and at those of them who still lived the pursuers were firing. One woman, who had fallen under the weight of the great slave stick, which was fastened about her throat, was crawling forward on her hands and knees. An Arab fired at her, and the bullet struck the ground under her stomach, but without hurting her, for she wriggled forward more quickly. I was sure that he would shoot again, and watched. Presently, for by now the light was good, I saw him, a tall fellow in a white robe, step from behind the shelter of a banana tree about 150 yards away, and take careful aim at the woman. But I too took aim, and Well, I am not bad at this kind of snap shooting when I try.